Our story begins in the 4th Academy of Sioux City. Standing on a platform in front of a crowd of students who were standing on some kind of magic circle, the academy's principal, whose name was Shui Jinlong, announced in a solemn voice that today was the day they were to become inner world players. After that, he said that the system would inform them of their class, role, and talents once they entered this formation. There were 4 main classes in total, and it was up to fate to decide whether a student would become a legendary swordsman, a steadfast and reliable knight, a stealthy and skillful assassin hiding in the shadows, or a powerful mage. Having finished with the explanations, the principal wished all the students good luck, as it could decide their fate. After that he activated the transfer formation, as a result of which the magic circle on which the students were standing glowed with a bright blue light. In the very center of the magic circle also stood the hero of our story. His name was Qiao Yu, and he was an ordinary student, except for the fact that 18 years ago he reincarnated into this world. And all this time, he had been waiting for this day. The world he entered after his death was called Kaiji Star. It was a parallel world that was extremely similar to Earth. However, one day, the artificially created parallel world suddenly descended to Earth, causing many changes. The first of them was the appearance of dungeons that were full of monsters. A normal person would never have been able to pass them, but fortunately people began to have superpowers, which were passed on after reaching 18 years through transfer formation, and thanks to which people were able to clear dungeons. Dared to challenge the dungeons, for killing monsters received points and increased their level. As they leveled up, they received attribute points, thanks to which they could increase their combat power. We go back to our hero, who after activating the magic circle fell into some dimension, where in the next moment he was greeted by a system voice that asked if he wants to open his class. Without hesitating for a second, he answered in a firm voice and said yes. Inside he was very worried and begged fate to give him a good class, as his entire future depended on it. After a few seconds of loading, a turquoise aura appeared around him, enveloping him like a fierce flame, and above the aura appeared someone's skull, eyes, and mouth blazing with fire. A moment later, the system congratulated you for obtaining the hidden class. He stared at his body, which was overflowing with energy, in surprise and incomprehension. In the next second, the system solemnly announced that he had been awarded the hidden class, Necromancer. Hearing this, our protagonist couldn't contain the overflowing emotions that came after realizing what class he had received. After all, Necromancer was an extremely rare class that was only obtained by 1 or 2 people in the entire world. This class was so powerful that it allowed him to summon countless first-class undead from the gates of hell with a single swing of his staff, an army that the summoner could control as long as he had enough mana. Opening the status window that displayed all of his characteristics, he first decided to check his attributes, for gaining a hidden class meant that he had to be stronger than the others. There he found that his strength was 10, defense 6, agility 6, and health 10. However, to our hero's disappointment and despair, the spirit attribute that he so desperately needed was 0. Panicking, he grabbed his head. Falling to his knees, he wondered how this could happen, because the attribute points were given randomly, as well as the class itself. The maximum value that could get beginner was 10 points. In addition, the spirit attribute was the most important for a mage, and how he was supposed to fight without it was a mystery. Yu, who was on his knees crying in despair, was approached by the system and asked if he would accept the role for his talent now. Yu, who had already resigned himself to his fate as a loser, replied that he did, as he was already doomed, because even if he received an S-level talent, which was considered the best, it would be useless to him, as his spirit was of low level. In the next moment, the rolling for talent began. After a moment, an aura appeared around him again, but this time blue in color, followed by congratulations from the system, which informed him that he had received a talent called Brave Heart of a Magician, which gave 10 points of attributes. In a more detailed description it was reported that it had 2 effects, the first of which was a passive skill that allowed the user to gain attribute points for killing monsters with physical attacks, while the active effect allowed the user to increase other attribute values to the same value as a certain attribute value. However, for such a strong skill, there were restrictions that allowed the active effect to be used only once, and only in relation to a single attribute. From what he read, our hero's eyes opened wide with surprise, because despite his previous skepticism, now he was really surprised. The reasons for his surprise were not unfounded, as it was almost impossible to get free attribute points, because it was necessary to either increase the level or to train hard. However, with this passive skill, he could get attribute points that were so important to him simply by killing enemies with physical attacks. In addition, he could still use his active attribute once, and raise his other attributes to the same level as his highest one. And if he were to raise all his attributes to 10 now, he would become a monster among beginners that would surely be made history. However, in the long run, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do, because if he waited for his strength to reach 1000 or even higher and then used this skill, something unthinkable could come from it. After all, a necromancer with 100,000 points in each attribute would be a real disaster, able to face an entire army alone. Smiling in anticipation, telling himself that the best choice at the moment would be to raise the strength that was needed for his passive skill, which could help him quickly gain a lot of attribute points. So the very next moment, he clenched his fist and raised his hand up, telling the system to add 10 attribute points to strength. Looking at his system status window again, he found that his strength was currently 20 points. Finished with that, you decided that it was now time to register and take the beginner's test, for only after completing it would it be considered a success. In the next moment, the system activated a teleport that resembled a water vortex, in which our protagonist disappeared. A moment later, he appeared on a stone bridge, at the end of which was a portal, near which someone was standing. It turned out that it was an elf girl, who greeted him and said that her name was Elaine and that she was his guide. Finished with the introduction, she asked if there was anything she could do to help him. A little surprised by the girl's beauty, and wondering to himself if she was really just an NPC, Yu replied that he had come to register and accept the beginner's task. Upon hearing this, she replied that she would be happy to help, and then handed him a gift box, telling him that it was a beginner's gift. As soon as he opened it, a book and a staff appeared in front of him, as well as a cape that was automatically equipped on him. At the same moment, the system sent congratulations for obtaining the old robe, staff, and grimoire with the F-level skeleton summoning skill. Examining the items that fell out to him, he noted that the robe was just a mere accessory, while the summoning skill was useless since he had a 0 spirit level. But what really seemed valuable to him was the staff, which looked quite sturdy, and which combined with his 20 points of strength, could be a very useful crushing weapon. Turning to the girl, Yu asked what his beginner task was. She pointed to the portal and replied that he would have to escape from the misty cave. Not paying attention to the shadow that flashed near her and headed for the portal, she continued her explanation, saying that he had to be very careful and not to kill the skeletons, but just to find the fastest way to escape. She wanted to continue and say what would happen to him otherwise, but with surprise and incomprehension she looked around and found no one. At the same time, our protagonist stepped out of the portal in anticipation. As his guide said, he really got into a misty cave, the floor of which was strewn with someone's skulls and bones. The atmosphere of this place was added by the souls, which were like blue lights flying in the air. Only after entering the cave, you remembered that the girl had said something else about the mission, but he didn't remember anything else. He said that since it was a beginner's task, it should not be difficult. However, in the next moment, he was interrupted by a skeleton that appeared behind him and rushed at him with a dagger. Reacting quickly, you instantly turned around and prepared for a fight. According to the description that appeared in the system window, the attacker was a level 1 skeleton soldier who had 20 health and 5 strength. The protagonist immediately pulled out his staff, with which he immediately rushed towards the skeleton. Without letting it get any closer, he struck first, which instantly took away 20 health from the skeleton. Which was fatal to the skeleton, which was left with only a fading skull. A little surprised that he was able to kill him with a single blow, he noted sarcastically that not being able to use magic must be really hard. In the next moment, the system sent him a congratulatory notification saying that for killing the skeleton with a physical attack, he received 1 attribute point and 3 experience points. In addition, he also received another passive A-rank skill called Miracle of Might as a reward for killing a monster with a single blow for the first time. This skill doubled the points already invested in the user's strength. Yu was pleasantly surprised as he was able to obtain a very strong skill. Looking at his status window, in which near his strength attribute now had an icon of its doubling, he came to the conclusion that strength determined the damage he dealt, while defense determined how much damage was reduced. Which meant that now if the opponent had no defense, he could deal 42 points of damage in one hit, which was incredible. However, in the next moment, our hero was interrupted by a noise that belonged to the many bony hands that were coming out of the ground, which belonged to the same skeletons. Realizing that his task was of paramount importance, he decided to concentrate on it first. Already in the next instant, bursting out of the ground, a crowd of skeleton warriors, who were clearly not friendly, were rushing towards him. However, even in front of the deadly blades that threatened to pierce him, he continued to stand coldly, waiting for the right moment. In the next instant, the moment had already arrived. With a swing of his staff, Yu destroyed 4 skeletons at once with a single blow, dealing 20 damage each, which was deadly to those skeletons. Still burning with green flames, the heads fell to the ground while our hero received a notification that for killing 4 skeleton warriors with a physical attack, he received 4 attribute points as well as 12 experience points. As it turned out, thanks to these experience points he also increased his level, for which he received 5 attribute points as a reward. Adding them to the ones he received for killing skeletons, he had a total of 30 points of strength, which was unbelievable, because usually if a beginner received 10 points of any of the attributes, he would be considered a genius. However, Yu was still worried about whether farming levels by killing skeletons was too easy for beginners. However, as if reading his mind, it wasn't just some ordinary skeleton that appeared from the ground. This time it was a rather imposing skeleton armed with a large shield and a spear. It was a level 3 skeleton captain who had 50 health points, 15 strength, as well as 20 defense, but like the past skeletons, its agility was still 1. Seeing the opponent's strength, Yu noted that he would be in trouble if he received even 1 hit. Taking out his staff, he thought to himself that it didn't matter, since he still had 1 dexterity point, which meant that he would win if he hit first. The next moment he threw a punch, but the skeleton had no problem blocking it with his shield. And the next second he counterattacked back, trying to hit our hero with his spear, which he successfully dodged. Such actions of the skeleton really surprised Yu, because he would never have thought that he would counterattack so quickly. However, in the interval when the skeleton was about to make another strike, our hero had a chance to successfully carry out an attack, which he immediately took advantage of. Taking advantage of his opponent's delay, he struck him a blow, which, although it did not cause damage, was able to create an opportunity for him to make another attack. Then he leapt into the air. And with a fierce cry for him to try and block it, he landed a blow directly on the skeleton's head that instantly drained it of 50 health points, killing it. After receiving a notification from the system that he had defeated the skeleton captain and received 3 attribute points and 10 experience for it, Yu noted that this opponent was really strong. Which made him wonder how the others were able to deal with it. However, what was really important at the moment was the glowing yellow light sphere that fell out after the skeleton captain's death. He already knew what it was, because the headmaster had told them that after defeating the monster, there was a chance that a core would fall out of it, from which a random reward could be obtained. After opening it, he received a skeleton fist set D rank, which after applying it allowed for a 100% critical strike. But to our hero's disappointment, it was a disposable item. However, his peace was once again disturbed by the skeletons appearing from the ground, which did not sit still. It was not difficult for Yu to kill them, but the attribute points were very important to him. But even with his strength, he had to be careful as the number of enemies increased. And since he only had 20 health points at level 2, any mistake could cost him his life. So without relaxing for a second, he rushed at the skeletons, striking them with his staff, which were deadly for them. After destroying 5 skeletons, he leveled up again, for which this time he received 10 attribute points. After finishing the skeletons, he noted to himself that it was quite easy only because luckily the skeletons only had 1 point of dexterity. However, it didn't matter now as he leveled up again and had to check the status window. While the protagonist was fighting the monsters in the cave, outside the school, the students who had successfully passed the beginner's test were having fun discussing what classes they had gotten. However, despite the joy of success, some students were wondering why the principal hadn't announced the graduation yet, and if anyone had managed to fail in such a short time. Some of the students even scoffed, asking how anyone could fail such a simple task, because although the skeletons inside were quite strong, they were also very slow, and running away from them was not a big deal. However, among the students, there was one guy who was not laughing, but was standing anxiously waiting, wondering why Yu still hadn't come out, and whether something had happened to him. The same guy was standing in the middle of the cave, wondering why the system wasn't telling him that the task was completed, and if the reason was because he hadn't killed all the skeletons yet. The next moment he heard someone's cold voice, which angrily asked how he dared. Our hero immediately became wary, because from the owner of such a scary voice you could expect anything. In the next second, skulls and bones lying on the floor, being moved by some force, began to rise into the air. After that, bypassing the shocked and a bit scared Yu, they started flying towards one place, where they immediately began to gather together. A few seconds later, a bright green flame erupted from the head of the formed creature. A moment later, he was faced with a truly intimidating opponent, who in addition to being larger, also had 4 arms that held weapons. In the following second, the main head gave a heartbreaking roar. As it turned out, this skeleton was a boss called a level 10 Skeleton King. Even though he was slightly injured, he still had 400 health points, which was very impressive. He also had a strength of 45 and defense of 60, luckily agility like the others, he had 1 point. Apart from all that, it even had a few skills. After seeing the information about the monster, Yu was puzzled and wondered what was going on, because he couldn't understand how a beginner's task could have a boss, and how beginners should fight it. However, he had no time to think about it, because the Skeleton King raised his huge weapon above his head in the next instant, and then immediately rushed at him. Although it was powerful and destructive, it was also slow enough that our hero was able to dodge it. Qiao Yu realized that he was really lucky that he was able to dodge it, because if he had been hit, he would have been dead for sure. But even though this opponent was strong, he was still not agile enough, and that was still Qiao Yu's only advantage against him. On top of that, this boss's defense was at 60 and his attack power would most likely not be enough to penetrate it and cause significant damage. However, he decided to give it a try and rushed towards his enemy with speed. He dashed past his enemy with lightning speed, delivering a swift strike with his staff that only dealt 32 damage. Seeing this, he realized that even though his attack worked, it didn't do as much damage as he had hoped. But still, if he could successfully attack the Skeleton King more than 10 times, it would be fine and he could defeat him. And taking advantage of his agility skill, he began to deliver blow after blow. All of his 5 strikes hit the target and each of them dealt 32 damage. Boss Skeleton King was staggered by this unexpected barrage of blows and fell to the ground with a thud, raising clouds of dust. Seeing his helplessness, our hero asked if this fellow is really here just to scare people. And now that the boss had gathered his bones back into a pile, he had only 200 health left and the fight would be over soon. However, it wasn't that simple, and when he saw the skeleton rising with renewed vigor he was surprised. The boss burst into a bright green flame and shouted furiously, saying that he had defended this cave of mist for so many years, but had never seen a player who had fought his way through it. He wouldn't be vulnerable now if less of his skeleton soldiers had died. And now that a beginner like Qiao Yu had somehow managed to break through his magnificent defense, he simply couldn't let such an impudent person get away alive. As the protagonist retreated, he noticed that the skeleton boss had become stronger. The boss rushed straight at him with an unaccustomed speed. Qiao Yu was horrified to realize that the enemy had not only become stronger, but also faster. However, he still managed to dodge the next deadly strike, and jumped back to a safe distance. Now he didn't have so many options when it seemed that a direct attack was now impossible and he should have limited the boss movement first. But the question remained how to do that. However, the answer came by itself. When the skeleton rushed towards him to attack, he noticed a stone pillar that looked quite fragile. Qiao Yu quickly realized that he could use this stone pillar to damage the skeleton and restrict its movement. To do so, after another attack, he ran closer to the column, luring the skeleton boss closer to it. The one was blinded by rage and didn't suspect anything, hence he rushed into another attack. Qiao Yu only teased him more by saying, "Come at me, you big blockhead." He couldn't bear such an insult and rushed at him with a roar, intending to unleash his full power on him. Qiao Yu dodged the blow at the last moment, but this time he was not as successful as before. The seemingly slightest scratch from the skeleton strike dealt as much as 26 damage and knocked him back, while the main force of the attack hit the stone. Suffering from the pain, the protagonist could not believe that a simple scratch had reduced his life to such a low level, leaving him with only 4 points out of 30. The enraged skeleton decided to end things here and now and finish off the wounded impudent man. Qiao Yu was already preparing to die and his face was distorted with fear. However, his plan still worked and the skeleton was forced to turn around when he heard the sound of falling stones. This stone column could not withstand the last blow and began to crumble, threatening to collapse right on the skeleton boss. He couldn't get far enough away and was pelted with a lot of stones. This rockfall dealt him as much as 70 points of damage at a time. And now the wounded skeleton king only had 129 health points out of 500. Qiao Yu realized that he couldn't hold on like this for long and had to finish it quickly before the skeleton woke up again. Therefore, he decided to kill it with a single blow. To do so, he jumped high above it and used the skeleton boxing glove to power up his next attack. Unfortunately, this item was disposable, but it was very useful. Using it gave a guaranteed chance to deal critical damage with the next strike after using it. And Qiao Yu was determined not to miss his last chance. The skeleton boss couldn't believe that this brat was about to end his years-long stay in this cave. The main character's punch was incredibly powerful and simply blew off the skeleton's head along with his last points of life. And only the remnants of his green cursed flame were left to burn among the rocks. Immediately after that, a blue portal and information windows appeared in front of our protagonist, congratulating him on completing the beginner's quest, Escape from the Cave of Mist. But besides this expected notification, he was also congratulated for being the first to kill the Cave of Mist's boss, the Skeleton King. For this, he received 30 additional attribute points. The remnants of the flames from the skeleton behind his back glowed and formed a core, but it didn't end there, and many other information windows appeared around the player. Now because he defeated the skeleton boss through melee combat, he was getting 10 more additional attribute points and also 50 experience points. He was also rewarded for gaining 2 new levels. Our hero was now level 5. Qiao Yu walked over to the core and reached out his hand to open it. Still not believing his success and luck, not only was he able to defeat the boss first, but he was also able to obtain the equipment dropped from the boss. The reward for killing the boss first was the Ring of the Skeleton King. It was a C-rank item that increased the player's damage after his first attack by 50%, the recharging effect of this item was 24 hours and most importantly there were no roll restrictions on it. Looking at this ring, the protagonist thought that it was really not bad. Yes, this ring was not as strong as the skeleton boxing glove, but it had the advantage that it could be used all the time. And in any case he could sell it, and due to his high rank the ring would be worth several 100,000 and he could just strike gold this time. After admiring the precious item he had finally received, he finally turned his attention to the notices. He was surprised to see that he was the first to kill the boss among all the players. He wondered if this could mean that no one had killed this Skeleton King until now. How then could the other students have passed the test? But he didn't wonder about it for long and just gave up, deciding to leave this cave and complete the challenge as he thought first. As a result, during the first beginner's challenge, he was able to reach level 5 and a power level of 76, making him a really powerful player. He was also able to obtain the talent, the Mage's Brave Heart, skill, Muscle Crate's Miracles, and equipment, the Ring of the Skeleton King. When he left the portal, it closed after him, which meant that he was the last student to complete the challenge. As soon as he appeared, his friend Yang Xiangdi nearly knocked him down with his joyful embrace, causing him to shout indignantly and push him away. But the man still kept up with him and was happy to see him. He asked what had happened to him and why he had taken so long to complete the beginner's task. Because of this, he was already starting to get worried and thought that he had died there. But Qiao Yu at first didn't even believe his words and the fact that all the students had completed the mission so quickly and left the portal. Yang Xiangdi told him that it's been 3 hours since the last person came out. Qiao Yu was surprised at their speed, but still asked what role did his friend get to change the subject. He had been waiting for this question, so he fixed his cape and proudly announced that he had become a mage and jokingly asked if he knew what that role was. Amusingly parodying Lord Voldemort and his Avada Kedavra spell. Looking at his elevated mood, the protagonist couldn't believe that they were in the same world at the trial. It looked like his friend was having an easy outing. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a smug guy who had come to scoff at the fact that Qiao Yu had come out last. He was no ordinary student, his name was Ma Fei and he was a class monitor. Staring arrogantly at the protagonist, he said that he's nothing but an embroidered pillow. And the fact that he looked cute wouldn't help him in the other world, where talent is the most important thing. At the end, he asked if he knew his role. Qiao Yu looked at him and wondered why Ma Fei loves to pick fights with him. But despite his caustic remarks, he decided to ignore them so as not to get into trouble yet. Seeing that all the students had passed the test, the principal announced that everyone was now already enrolled in the other world. He congratulated them and warned them that tomorrow the whole class would participate in beginner training. After that he invited everyone to introduce themselves, their roles and talents to know each other better. Immediately from the crowd of students there were happy and not so happy shouts, where everyone presented their roles and talents. Some had become soldiers, some had become assassins, and some had gotten a low-ranked talent despite having a good role and were now very upset about it. One girl, Zhao Ziyue, became a mage and healer. And along with this fact, her very attractive appearance attracted the attention of the entire male student population, who didn't mind getting such a teammate. Apparently she even had a fan club that called her Nanny. And they didn't call her that because she was a healer. That other Nanny, if you know what I mean. Another girl's Qiao Yu, despite her frail physique, got the role of paladin or meat shield and B-rank talent. She was also lucky enough to get high defense stats, which together with her role made her a strong player and a desirable teammate. The next one was the already familiar student Ma Fei, who had the role of a swordsman and a B-rank talent, as well as high scores in all skills. His appearance was confident and strong, and apparently, an asshole like him was lucky to have the skills he had. The other students were surprised at his role and performance. After all, swordsman is an extremely powerful role in the other world. Someone said that the class monitor was blessed by the heavens as expected. Looking at the students, the principal thought that it looked like this batch of students wasn't bad, as there were many highly ranked talents and capable students among them who could be considered geniuses. Finally, it was Qiao Yu's turn, and surrounded by an aura of dark flames, he announced to everyone that he had gotten the role of a necromancer. But suddenly all his self-confidence evaporated when he couldn't reveal his talent to everyone, explaining that it's not convenient for him to reveal his talent at this time. He thought to himself that everyone else shouldn't know about his talent. But no one cared a bit, because after hearing his role, even the principal was thrilled that one of his students had gotten a rare hidden role. The other students were even more surprised than he was, and they didn't have enough words to describe their surprise. One student even remembered that there had once been a necromancer who wiped out another union on his own. Ma Fei, who had been teasing the protagonist, was now tense. He couldn't believe how this was possible. But he reassured himself that even so, even though it was a hidden role, it had its disadvantages. Mages were known for their fragility, and the thing they feared the most was that someone would get close to them quickly or stealthily and kill them. Moreover, necromancers were even more fragile than regular mages, since according to their role, they spent many years in dungeons establishing contact with the undead. In addition to that, it takes extremely long to cast a summoning spell, and it could be said that they have big problems in one-on-one battles without teammates to protect them. So assassins, swordsmen and similarly attack-focused roles the necromancer's best friends. Ma Fei looked at Qiao Yu's back with a smug smile and noticed that he hadn't named his talent and rank. Therefore, he was 100% sure that he did so because his talent was too low level, and he felt embarrassed to say it loudly in front of everyone. But the other students were not so envious and were only surprised at how reserved and tactful Qiao Yu was, even suggesting that this must be the difference between a genius and an ordinary person. Even his personality was so grounded. They were sure that they definitely couldn't have been so calm if they had gotten a hidden role. However, none of them knew the real reason for his behavior. And the disturbing thoughts that were running around in his head. Qiao Yu could only imagine what would happen tomorrow when everyone saw a necromancer who couldn't cast a single spell and was only slightly physically stronger than the others. He didn't even know if he would be able to defend himself during beginner training, so why would he dare to make a big fuss over this? What should he do when his classmates realize he can't summon even a single undead creature? He had so many questions and so few answers. At the same time, the headmaster was confident in his future success and that he would be able to enter the best universities in the world after successfully completing beginner training. When everyone finally introduced themselves and named their roles and talents, the headmaster announced that that was the end of the day. Everyone should go home to rest and prepare for tomorrow's beginner training. Qiao Yu headed home, but he was immediately caught up by his friend Yang Xiangdi and began to marvel at how incredible the protagonist was. He was even a little hurt that he himself did not get the role of a necromancer. But in the end, he wasn't so bad himself, as he had 8 spirit points. After bragging about his characteristics, he asked Qiao Yu why he didn't name his talent. It couldn't be that bad. Our protagonist, remembering his shameful 0 in spirit characteristic, replied to him that it doesn't matter, hard work can make up for clumsiness. At the same time, he thought that since his friend only had single-digit numbers in stats, then he with his 76 points in strength, he was definitely a god-level being compared to him, and it wasn't as bad as he thought. After that, Qiao Yu finally came home and said loudly, "I'm home," as if there should be someone at home. But there was only silence and emptiness. The house he lived in belonged to his parents and was left after they disappeared. That's why he always said, "I'm home," when he came home, hoping that someone would finally answer him. In his memories, his father and mother would say they were home every time they came back and he wanted to be like them. Unfortunately, now he could only remember them, and all he had left behind was one picture of them together. He remembered that they were very good and kind people, and it seemed to him that as a little boy he was the happiest child in the world. However, for reasons unknown to him, when he was 6 years old, his parents suddenly packed up quickly and told him that they had to go to the capital to settle important matters. And after that, he never saw them again. They suddenly, mystically disappeared, and after that, Qiao Yu became an orphan. Looking at the photo now, he thought that it had already been 12 years since they disappeared. He wondered where could they have gone. To find out, he was determined to enter the university in the capital and find out the truth behind his parents' disappearance. The next day our protagonist, along with the rest of the students, showed up at the place where the beginners were practicing. In front of them stood the principal, who announced that he had just one request for them. In a serious and gloomy voice, he asked them to remember that if they suddenly realized that they can't make it, they should return immediately. After all, even if they failed the training, it was still much better than dying. Hearing this, the students were really scared. But the principal calmed them down, saying that there was no need to be nervous about it. After all, usually in the world of beginners, where they will get, is not very dangerous, and rarely there are cases of death of players. But there are exceptions everywhere. And that's the case here. There was previously a catastrophic incident where a singular beginner's world caused a class of 40 to be completely wiped out and they vanished without a trace. To this day, no one knows what that terrible beginner's world was. All we know about it is that it's called Nightmare Village. And that it was filled with common and giant titan-like undead. Hearing this, the poor students were scared and confused. All their confidence in their own abilities vanished without a trace. The principal continued to play emotional swings with them and again announced that there's no need to be so solemn either. As long as they leave the other world in time, there will be no danger for them. Finally he advised them to get ready, because once this stopwatch reaches 0, it's time to enter the other world. Immediately the countdown began and 10 seconds flew by like a blink of an eye. The stopwatch emitted a loud beep. And immediately after that the principal announced that the beginner's training has begun. and dark streams of energy swept over all the students. In a moment, the whole class with a flash of dark lightning moved to another world where they were to take the test. The students started to come to their senses and tried to realize where they were, looking around. From the looks of it, the village was the most ordinary and quiet. While Qiao Yu continued to look around, Ma Fei began to smugly reassure all the students, convincing them that he would defeat all the opponents and protect everyone. But they were somehow not in a hurry to believe him, although this world seemed to be calm and peaceful, but the eerie feeling and gloomy foreboding did not leave the students. There was a sepulchral silence in the village like a crypt. And it was not for nothing, because the bloody sign, Nightmare Village, hung there not for beauty at all. And in the shadows of the houses, there were many dead blue feet. It seems that this wouldn't going to be a training for beginners but a nightmare massacre.